Hi, everyone. It's been an amazing day. We've all taken in a great deal, a lot of wonderful things. But the success of my idea depends on all of you, so I need you to hang in there for a few more minutes. My presentation depends on your presence, on your attention, on your skills, on your dreams. Because my idea is that among the people here today, there is the potential and the power to change the world. It's that basic. I believe that the we who have become a we by virtue of being together in this time and in this place can collectively make the world a better place. Now, I realize that this is a relatively select group of people, and so it might sound like I'm cheating a little bit, tossing this idea out to people who have already spent an entire day devoted to the concept of doing more good. But the thing is that I believe this idea is always true. It's the foundation of almost everything that I do as a pastor, as a priest, as an advocate for social justice. I believe that this idea is absolutely transferable, universally applicable, no matter the time or the place or the people. I believe that the us who become an us have the ability to change the world for good. And to top it off, it's not that hard. For those of you who think mathematically, I've put my idea into a formula. Here's the math of my idea. The needs of the world, of which there are many, granted, we don't have to be naive about this, when combined with the skills and talents and resources and dreams of ours, of which there are also many, when those two entities are brought together and allowed to intermingle and connect, the sum total is a better world. It doesn't get much more simple than that. But for those of you who aren't mathematically inclined, here's a quote. Desmond Tutu said it like this: "Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world." So how does it work, you wonder? Well, we'll start with the first part of the equation, the world's needs, of which there are many, in case you've forgotten. Now, the thing about the world's needs is that they do tend to fall into several basic categories, and I've chosen 5 of those categories for today. And the 5 categories that I chose in part because they coincide relatively well with the Millennium Development Goals, which are the goals that many different organizations, different faith groups, different institutions are using to judge progress made in terms of addressing world needs. But I also chose these particular categories because of the particular interests and passions of the people who are here today. So world's needs: hunger, homelessness, access to quality education, and barriers related to isms and environmental sustainability. Now, for each of these, I'm going to give us just one statistic or a little bit of framing of what we're looking at. First, hunger. Hunger is the world's #1 health risk. More people die of hunger every year than of AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Homelessness. In the United States, the wealthiest country in the world, as many as 750,000 people per night, 3.5 million people per year are without homes. Access to quality education, something that I know is of great interest to many people here. About 69 million of the world's school-aged children were not attending school in 2008. To bring it a little closer to home, in the United States, graduation rates in our inner cities stand at about 50%. Overall graduation rates stand just over 70%. barriers related to humanisms. These are the barriers created by humans that stand between us and keep us from being human with each other. Racism, classism, sexism, heterosexism, and faithism, which, if you're wondering, is a word according to the Urban Online Dictionary. Finally, environmental sustainability, which I know is something that the people who've put together TEDxMacatawa have been particularly attentive to. Nearly 17,000 species of plants and animals are currently at risk of extinction. The main causes of biodiversity loss remain high rates of consumption, habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, and climate change. Now, one of the dangers of opening our hearts and our minds to the needs of the world is that we can end up in a dark place. And I think that that dark place needs to be named, but not embraced. Because I think that that dark place, at the heart of that dark place, is a sense of helplessness. And if we've learned anything today, it should be that none of us is helpless. Nobody in the world ultimately is helpless, because everyone has something to contribute. So we aren't going to stay here for long. Margaret Wheatley helps us out too with this quote. I believe the greatest source of courage is to realize that if we don't act, nothing will change for the better. Reality doesn't change itself, she says. It needs us. Reality doesn't change itself. It needs us. It's like we're being invited into this project, called into this project of caring for the reality that is not just mine and yours or theirs, but the reality that is ours. And the image that I hold in my mind for this invitation into reality is this image of two hands holding the world, and holding the world with some tender care. And this image is intentionally an artist's rendering of two hands holding the world, in part because I think of our work at this point of invitation as something like the work of an artist. In essence, we're all artists at this point, invited into the project of co-creating a better world. And the tools that we have at hand in this work as artists, the tools we have at hand are the second part of the equation. Our skills, our talents, our resources, and dreams, of which there are many, endless perhaps. So this is where I need you. When you applied to be a part of this day, you answered several questions. And one of the questions had to do with what good are you currently doing? Now, the good news is that everyone had an answer to that question. So there's no one here today who's not doing anything that's good. So we have a relatively safe starting place. But I wanted to take a step beyond simply you knowing the good that you're doing to us collectively having a sense of the good that's being done. And so here's a word cloud that is the result of all of your answers to the question of what good are you doing? Now look at the words that come forward. Holland, community, people, good, local, work, years, students, children. There's a lot that's being done. Now I want to move beyond simply gathering these together into a cloud to you actually talking to each other just for a minute. I want you to turn to someone next to you or in front of you or behind you and share 30 seconds worth at the most, I'll keep us moving, share a little bit of the good that you are currently doing. Go. Switch if you haven't switched. Okay, I'm going to call you back. And I hate to interrupt conversations about doing good, but we'll carry this on as we move into reception mode here in a minute. Now I want to ask you to combine that good with some of the needs of the world. We're going to see how this equation plays out right here in this room. Stand up if some of the good you're doing has to do with hunger, addressing issues of hunger. All right. Addressing issues of homelessness. Providing access to quality education. Stand up if any of the current work that you're doing is related to taking down the barriers that separate us that are related to various isms. Environmental sustainability. All right, take a seat. Now I want to take one more step together here as a group, and it's because of this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And this is a quote that, depending on the day, either inspires me or haunts me. And I consider both of those to be good reactions to these words from Martin Luther King Jr., who said this: "History will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition," now he was talking about a period earlier than ours, but certainly this applies and probably always does. "The greatest tragedy of this period was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." I think that one of the temptations of that dark place when we acknowledge the needs of the world is to say that those needs exist because of the bad things, rather than speaking up and offering our goodnesses that we have to give. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, and we know about that dream, but all of us have dreams too. And I know that's true because you answered another question on your application that had to do with what would you do if you could be guaranteed that you couldn't lose? So a sense of risk was taken off the table, and you were set free. What would you do if you knew that you couldn't lose? All right, talk to each other again. Turn to someone and tell them your dream. Switch if you haven't switched. Okay, change people. Turn to one other person who you haven't spoken to yet and share your dream. Good. All right, I'm going to call us back again. And I'm going to show you what happens when we put your answers to that question in a word cloud. A wonderful thing happens. A lot of the same words appear: people, community, education, children, but some new words surface and find their way through our voices. And words like world, community, create, words like everyone. So when we take a sense of risk out of the picture, or a sense that we might have something to lose, our impact grows. Our sense of how we might share our gifts with the world is broadened. Our vision grows. And so I'd like to ask you one more time to stand up if you have a dream that applies to issues of world hunger. Homelessness. Access to, provision of, quality education. Stand up if you have a dream that relates to taking away barriers that separate us from one another, those barriers based on humanisms. Stand up if you have a dream based on addressing issues of environmental sustainability. Look around. This is pretty much all of us who are here today, standing up. All right, now take a seat. Almost there. But when I experience this with groups, when I experience this with a relatively random group of people on a relatively random Thursday in random Holland, Michigan, and we're able to stand up almost unanimously and address that list of needs, I wonder if the equation looks more like this. There's an equation. I might have lost the batteries. There we go. I wonder if the equation looks more like this, that the needs of the world actually equal the gifts and talents and resources and dreams of the world. What if it is possible that we could just wipe it all out if we just put it all forward? They say it's true with food. I wonder if it's true with everything else. But then I think a little more, and I think in the world there are billions of people, and each of those people, no matter where they are or who they are, have gifts and talents and resources and dreams. So the billions has a multiplier of something in front of it. And I wonder if the equation really is more like this, that the world's skills and talents and resources and dreams are actually greater than the needs of the world. And I wonder if Desmond Tutu is right, if we really could wipe out the needs of the world, if we could overwhelm the needs of the world with goodness. I'm going to close. How does it work? Just a quick, brief summary. We listen to the world. We open our hearts to the needs of the world. We make room in our hearts. We risk a dream, as many of you wrote out and many of you stood up for today, and many of you are already doing out in the world. And we apply our gifts, and we trust that the equation is at least doable. I'm going to close with a quote from Jim Henson, who I am a big Henson fan. But more than being a fan of Jim Henson, he's actually one of my heroes. And he's one of my heroes because he changed the world, but not only because he changed the world, he's my hero because of how he changed the world. He changed the world with a puppet. And there's something kind of wonderful and simple about that. He changed the world with a puppet that he was willing to bring to life with his hands and his heart and his voice. And pretty soon that puppet had a whole neighborhood, right? Grover and Oscar and Mr. Hooper and Big Bird and Guy Smiley. And then that frog took his show on the road, and pretty soon there was a pig and a bear and a gonzo, I'm not even sure what gonzo was, and a scooter who kept it all running and together. And over the course of that frog's career, that frog addressed in one way or another all of the needs that I put up in front of us today. And it happened because one man was willing to dream and allow his voice and his heart and his hand to work together to bring that dream to life. Now, I believe we all have something like that puppet that is just waiting for our hands and our hearts and our voices to come together and offer that gift to the world. I encourage you to consider what that gift is, to offer it beyond yourself. We have nothing to lose and a better world to gain. Do good. Do more good. Do your good. And I'm convinced that collectively we'll change the world for good. Thank you.